Hey, it's Daniel Parsons here, stepping for Steve Athanates on the Ipswich Real Estate Podcast. I'm here with Steve Beech today. We're going to be unpacking a few things regarding the latest meet with the RBA. Maybe just want to jump straight into it and let us know where we're sitting right now.
Definitely. So ultimately, it just happened about an hour ago. The announcement, unfortunately, Steve and I were wrong again, so that's back-to-back mistakes. They did go up. So we did see a 0.25 increase. Mm-hmm. So the cash rate went from 3.85 up to 4.1%. So I guess out of what, as we all probably know, Iran is what's happening in the Middle East was a big
going on.
Predominant factor in regards to the rate movement. One thing that was interesting, they did talk about, they now do what they call as a unanimous decision. So there's 9 people that actually are part of the RBA that predetermine or vote on what movement we see. It was actually 5 for a rate rise and 4 for a hold.
I did notice that, I did.
So a big thing there was there was still a bit of conflicting information where a lot of people were like, do we need the rate rise? I think being that we already had one previously, probably we haven't seen the cause and effect of that. It takes about 60 days for a rate movement to actually see the data change. Yeah. Because they lifted rates today, banks don't pass it on for another 2-3 weeks, and then it goes to their following month's repayments. So it's probably about 8 weeks before anybody really sees the direct impact of a rate rise.
Yeah. And what do you think this obviously translates to? Obviously, this 0.25% increase, like what's that look for homeowners in basically Ipswich and surrounds, or in general?
Yeah, definitely. I guess a 0.25% interest rate rise. I guess the average home loan now has gone from about 500 to about 600,000. So on a $600,000 home loan, it increases your monthly repayments by about $90 a month. So.
In the grand scheme of things, it's obviously
it all adds up. But when you're borrowing $600,000, $90 or $20 a week isn't a huge amount in that side of things. Yeah. The biggest thing that we generally, and I'll be fielding a heap of these phone calls over the next coming days, is, Steve, now that there's been a 0.25% rate rise, how much does that actually impact my borrowing capacity? So not so much just the repayment, because a lot of people can afford an extra $10, $20 here. It's, stop having 2 coffees a week. Is what does that actually reduce your borrowing capacity? Now, a 0.25% rate rise actually only reduces your borrowing capacity by about sort of between $10,000 and $15,000. So if you could borrow up to, say, $1 million, you can now borrow $985,000. So again, it hasn't really drastically changed because the banks already put in what they call as a servicing or a buffer rate of 3%. So if your home loan rate, say 6%, means the banks assess your application at 9% anyway. So they're going to give that buffer in there for these up and down interest rate movements that we're seeing at the moment.
Was there anything after the announcement that was brought up in the meeting?
I guess in that question time, so Michelle Bullock comes out and talks an hour after the announcement. I guess a lot of the questions were, was the decision unanimous around that? The fact that were they planning on holding if there wasn't the Middle East conflict was probably the biggest question. With the Middle East conflict, with the price of oil going up, we're going to see a push on inflation regardless. Mm-hmm. Like people are paying 50 to 80 cents more per litre for fuel. That's then going to have an overflow effect into, I guess, transport costs. So just getting food to Woolies is going to push up the cost of Woolies. So everything of cost of living is going to go up based on the price of fuel. Was that sort of taken into effect that basically, not only are we going to see a rate rise now, we're also just being handed a cost of living hit as well. Yeah. So that was a few of the questions. I guess the other one was, with this impact, I guess, will we foresee, a potential, will the RBA push us too far into a recession, which is what everyone's sort of scared of. Yeah.
So with the rate rise, was there any kind of underlying issues that made them make this decision? Yeah.
I guess the actual data that comes out. So last meeting we saw, I guess, headline inflation sitting at 3.8%. It's still at 3.8%. Mm-hmm. Now the target band is essentially for them to be somewhere between sort of 2 and 3%. Now underlying inflation, which is once they take out some of the government subsidies and stuff like that, we went from 3.3 to 3.4%. So inflation is still heading in an upwards trajectory. like I sort of said, the last meeting where they had the rate cut, we're not really seeing that cause and effect yet, but inflation is still too high. So predictions were always, there was a potential for a rate cut to be announced anyway, but everyone was expecting it to be in May after we get the quarterly data. So we get the full January to quarter data figures through.
And what do we think is going to happen at the next meeting?
That's a bit of a tricky one, I guess, depending on what happens with the Strait of Hormuz. The Middle East conflict's a big determining factor. So being that they've just lifted rate again, I would like to personally say that they're going to put them on hold, particularly since it was a split decision in the factor. So I will predict that they will go on hold.
Yeah.
I think I've said that 3 times now and I've been wrong twice. So fingers crossed.
Third time lucky.
Third time's a charm. So, but that's my personal opinion. I know Steve normally sort of throws his hat in the wagon, but what do you think?
These guys.
You're going to follow me?
Yeah, let's go. Well, a big thanks to Steve Beech for coming in and obviously unwrapping everything that's involved with the RBA's latest announcement. A big thank you to everyone tuning in to today's episode of the Ipswich Real Estate Podcast. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, do all those kind of things. We do really appreciate it. And until next time, we'll catch you on the next episode of the Ipswich Real Estate Podcast. We'll see you then.